thank you for coming to today's event. Professor Tong Lam as our speaker. Professor Tong Lam is a historian, author, and visual artist. He's now an associate professor of history and a core faculty of the Asian Institute at the University of Toronto. His first book is titled A Passion for Facts, Social Service and Construction of the Chinese Nation-State, 1900 to 1949, which came out from the UC Press in 2011. His research interests cover modern and contemporary China and East Asia, modernity, ethnoscience, spectacle and urbanism, social theory, colonialism, and nationalism. As a visual artist, he uses photography and multimedia to explore industrial and post-industrial movements from around the world, as well as China's historical transformation, as he puts it. His photo essays have appeared in the Descent magazine, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and other major literary publications. Beside his photo exhibit, Unveiled Estate, which is currently on view here, another series of his work titled Navigation to Nowhere has just been exhibited in Guangzhou. This year, he is an invited fellow at Scottish College in Berlin to continue his research and art project. His second book, a photo album with his prose essays titled Abandoned Futures, has just come out this month. So we feel very honored to celebrate his new work with this special occasion. Please join me to welcome Professor Tong Lam.
So thank you for the very generous introduction. And I would like to particularly thank you for the Center for Chinese Studies, the Institute of East Asian Studies, Professor Andrew Jones, who invited me to be here, and thank you, Nego, to be the host, and thanks also companies for our preparation work, as well as other many people who are behind this project. And so today I mostly try at least as much as I do to escape from my other identity as a scholar. As much as I do, obviously I cannot. But I will try to give an artist talk that is probably mixed with a lot of intellectual and scholarly sensitivities. So we'll see how it works. It's often, I think the switch is here, and most what I'm going to do in my talk, I try to make it as brief as possible because my understanding is going to be a conversation and then of course a Q&A. So I'm trying to go through the material very quickly, and so I will have involved multiple series of images, and I will turn off the lights in those periods. In fact, I can probably turn it off. Yeah, I think we can still see each other, so we're safe. So it's often said that an image is worth 1,000 words, right? So perhaps let me begin with a few images. So there were 8 images there. So it's about 8,000 words. which is exactly the link of an article. And of course, I wish that my university and my department would count it as an article. Too bad they won't. But at the same time, I also don't think that they are really an article. And I guess that's the point. The point is that I want to get to at the beginning is to think about the relationship between the tension that is for me as an artist and also as a historian. And perhaps to begin with a few words to explain exactly how do I get to this point. It was about a little bit more than a decade ago, in the beginning of 2000s, when I was still a graduate student. When I was doing field work for my dissertation at the time. And as a poor graduate student, my project involved multiple archival sites that I have to visit to do my research. And as a poor graduate student, at the time when I was in Beijing for the summer, I would have to stay outside the Third Ring Road. At the time, even the 2000 Third Ring Road was quite expensive. So it was pretty far away from the archive, #1 archive inside of the city that I need to use. Right? So every morning, at the time, remember this is sort of Olympic Beijing. So some of the subway lines, especially the south side of the city, were not yet available. So at the time, every morning I have to travel for almost an hour during the rush hour to get to the archive. Either by bus, sometimes, because it's really so difficult that you end up actually taxi is quite cheap in Beijing. You take a taxi if you can find one. Take like 40 minutes to get one. And then as I go through the city from one end to the center of the city, then you see all these stunning things happening in the city of Beijing, which of course anyone who visits China knows these things are happening, not just in the major gold cities such as Beijing and Shanghai, but also these days in the second and the third tier city. What we see is some of the images that I just showed you. Things like endless construction, demolitions, the billboards and hauntings outside of construction sites, covering the slum behind that promise everything about the future. But hiding is, of course, the kind of suffering, anger, right? And things that no one wants to see behind us. So as I go through this every day in the morning, I'm just thinking, do I really get it as a historian when you stay in the so-called basement, like this sort of metaphor being a historian, work in the dusty archives in the basement, and yet above ground you have all these things happening. Now, of course, as a historian, I firmly believe, right, that's why I didn't give up my profession. I firmly believe because a lot of things has to be and can in fact be understood as a historical process. But at the same time, also, if you think everything has already repeated itself, simply yet another version of the past, then of course, then you're also being ahistorical. Of course, that's something. So that was the moment I began to grab my camera to just almost like snapshot, kind of document what's going on around me when I was in China. I could, I don't think I want to do it now, but if anyone want to ask a question later in Q&A, exactly why, my relationship with arts. So that was my coincidence with my camera. So that was another early history. But in any case, by this time when I was in college though, I was spending a lot of time doing black and white photography in a dark room. I spent a lot of time in that room. I love the dark room because it is the chemicals. Even though I didn't like chemistry and physics, but that was the time that you can actually, I feel like, control the chemicals, right? And see in this red light, and see the image begin to emerge as you're doing this deriving process and the printing process. I love the smell of the chemicals. And of course, by the time I started my grad school and doing my PhD, you simply didn't have time to really to work on anything serious in terms of photography because you really have to focus on presentation. So I basically gave up. So by the time I'm doing this, is very much a sort of totally unprofessional and I would say random. At the same time, it's also a very ambitious way of engaging it. Fast forward a few years later, when I had my first job, I keep going back to China, including Beijing, and to do follow-up archival research, and I continue to document this process, these projects. And then,
it was about 5 years ago or so, after I moved to Toronto, shortly after I moved to Toronto, by simply a coincidence, I began to get into a building where was the former Kodak factory in Toronto, that as digital revolution. That there was a lot of Kodak plants in manufacturing prints and films, etc. Right? The Kodak headquarters was in Rochester, New York, but they have a huge operation in Toronto, and they were demolishing this place. And I just one day I drove past this area and I saw this building, and I wanted to grab a few photos of it, sort of remind me of what I saw in China. And then I noticed this building was like wide open, that you can actually see me walk in, and I did. I walked into this building alone with my camera, again, pure accident. And I began to see something that was stunning. There was a basketball court inside this building on the second floor. This is an employee building. And it reminded me of some of the art, photographic work done by some Chinese artists, documenting the vanishing of the socialist China. Right? It reminded me, of course, that in fact, there's a moment in time, even in Western democracy, right, that you do have a system that is rather similar. And I post those images online on Flickrs. Again, just for fun. In the next few weeks, I got hundreds and hundreds of people coming to the comments to talk about people, either the parents who work in those places or they themselves actually work in those spaces, to bring up memory from these people and they begin to talk about it. And I was quite stunned by the reaction. Simply, no one knows who I am and I don't even know who these people are, but simply something about those images enable people to have a conversation. Ever since then, personally became very attracted to some of the industrial ruins, and very much the project that I talk about today is at least started with that to some degree, but also my interest in China in general. And the book that just came out that April mentioned, of course, is very much a larger project that is not simply about China for the most part. It's actually not about China, but it's about this sort of the similar parallel project elsewhere. And most of the images really came from North America, Europe, and elsewhere in Asia. There's a few images from China, of course. So, now, one of the things though, when I was beginning to photograph those places in North America, I can give you one example. During the time, I also spent a lot of time, not a whole lot, but spent quite a bit of time in the Southwest U.S. To do some of the photography, particularly night photography, with a group of photographers. And one of them is sitting right over there. Thank you for coming. And so at night, we would go out and shoot in those car junkyards for like forever, right? We went out about 5 p.m. and then do all the way until like 3 a.m. in the morning. And then during the day, you're supposed to sleep. In the afternoon, sort of like a workshop kind of thing, that you critique each other's work and then you go back to the junkyard and do it over again. But during the day, I always can't sleep very well because the time differences. And I end up just driving around in the deserts. And often I see these ghost towns. And being a historian myself, I never actually pay attention to them. I always assumed that those ghost towns were simply because, well, they were done with the mining, so nothing left, and of course they become ghost towns. But what I didn't realize is, in fact, a lot of those ghost towns became abandoned not because they run out of resources. Of course, that's always part of the story. A lot of them is simply because it's overdevelopment, overinvestment. A lot of them became abandoned shortly after they were built. Right? And that suddenly remind me, as someone who studies China, is all this media sensation about the so-called ghost cities in China. Wudong, a few images in the series is about Wudong. It's a city that was built for 1 million people who did not show. And it's by no means unique. You can see those so-called ghost cities everywhere in China, right? But it was presented by the media as something that is incomprehensible, almost in an Orientalist way, right? This is something totally different. Weird. But that was the time that reminded me of, in fact, that we have witnessed this kind of thing happen elsewhere. And it seems to me, of course, it's one of the underlying logic of capitalism, right? What we see today in China is, of course, the extreme version of that. That doesn't, by no means, was totally so ridiculous. And so I want to very quickly to show a few images to just illustrate my point, and I think I also talk about it right now as well. So I'm not saying that this is exactly the same phenomenon, but of course they are related. And this is something I want to sort of bring out, as I said earlier, about my split identity of being a scholar and an artist, is that I constantly, as I see those images, process those sites, it keep coming back to me and say, how do we relate these issues in a larger context? So a lot of my works in the book, particularly, but also in my ongoing works, is really trying to investigate that question. I don't want to treat China as something that's exotic, that's so different. At the same time, we need to understand the specificity of it, but also in this broader context. So that's one thing I want to keep coming out to break out. And another example. When we talk about industrial ruins, there's a lot of attention, of course, given to places like Detroit, for instance. Detroit was a city that used to have more than 2 million people, and now it's only a population only about 700,000. A popular local pastime is to burn buildings or to watch them being burned. I'm not making those up. Now, when we talk about Detroit in the American context, often, not always, but invokes a kind of almost jingoistic narrative that say, in the 80s it was the Japanese who stole our jobs, now it's the Chinese who stole our jobs, right? It's often, in other words, what enables this narrative is simply because we look at Detroit as if this is something that's isolated, as if it is a zero-sum game if this happened here, and then the other part must be all nice and shiny. But of course, it is not. Again, if you look at what's actually happening in other parts of the world, and globalization certainly is an uneven process, right? At the same time, they are very much connected. As much as we create ruins here, as much as China seems, at least, at some level, when we look at it, it seems there are this shiny new building, spectacular architecture, but at the same time, of course, that you can also see the process of globalization actually created a lot of ruins as well. One set of ruins, by no means the only one, there's too many of them for me to go by as surveys, but is at least as a set example was the steel factories and some of the older socialist factories. As we know, steel industry in the socialist context, right? Steel is workers is really the core of the socialist revolution. So not unlike Detroit, you can see ruins are also being created in this process. Now, I will never forget the images of this three child, including the little girls in the middle. This particular site was the called Tong Lam, one of the copper factory that started actually the late chain, and it will continue to be used as a military factory, and then at some point it will become abandoned. All these workers who used to work there, they belong to the Danwei. I'm not going to explain that, but the unit, the work unit that they belong to. People live within the compound. The factory provide not just housing, but also school, healthcare, and the shopping, everything. You don't have to come out. For those who are interested, maybe you can take a look at, for instance, Jia Zhangke's movie, 24 City. In fact, this is also in Sichuan, so it's not too far away from the site of the movie. And so, so I will never forget her face, because when I was taking photos in that place, these people are no longer connected to any Danwei at all. What happened is that in the late 90s, the Danwei, the working unit they belong to, meaning that factories, they basically purchased to pay them one-time fees to terminate the relationship, meaning they have no more any relationship with that factory. In fact, the factory is already our business, and in other words, their relationship with they have completely changed, right? Even connected in new content, which meaning there's no connected in any significant way. And yet, what is stunning about this is people continue to imagine that they have this Danwei. Even though they have no more income, they are being forced to relocate from this, and this area will be developed into fancy condos, right? And so I was around taking photos of the area, and they walked up to me, and this little girl in the middle, and said that, you want to come to our home, our beautiful home belongs to us. And I feel so sad when I heard that, right? Because this exact story is precisely the opposite. They were actually being pushed out. And they were waiting, they want to grab to this place as long as possible so that they can stay longer. Capital Steel in Beijing, so Guangzhou is another steel factory. In fact, the steel factory in China, because in Beijing, same story, even though the factory continued to exist, but it was relocated to another place, not even inside Beijing, and this place was turned out to become another wasteland, but hopefully eventually we developed it into another kind of entertainment complex with condominium shopping as well as some creative industry parks. And for those of you who do not read Chinese, basically it's a solidarity, friendships, and progress, which capture the spirit of the socialist revolution. And I think the picture captures something quite different. Another type of ruins I particularly like is amusement park. I call them unprecious spots, and I have a whole chapter of that in my book. George Owen, actually, once upon a time, he had an essay called Precious Spots. That was in the 1940s. He writes about this, and he projected that in the future, according to him, this world will be made up of so-called precious spots, meaning in the precious spots, you don't have to do anything. People will serve you. There will be constant music. Temperature will be fully controlled. The constant music is about to dial your thought and sensitivities, so make sure you don't fake. And of course, the precious spot that he's talking about, we know that it already exists everywhere in our world. Shopping mall, cruise ships, amusement parks, right? So for me, abandoned theme park is the unprecious spots. It's a time where we are being unplugged from the matrix, from the virtual realities. But perhaps one way to think about is the virtual reality itself has been unplugged. And this exists in China in the selection that I presented here, and in the book you should see a lot more unprecious spots from all over the world, from Japan, from the US, and elsewhere. Now, because the limited time we want to get to, have to make one, so he can grill me with his challenging questions. So I don't want to go on, but I said, there's many kind of ruins. So I should give you a few examples. So then I want to get to very quickly the main topic that I want to talk about, which won't take much time, but this is the sort of, for me, is exciting. So in the spirit of being, not just being an artist, but also being a scholar, I want to share with you just something that's more like a work in progress, something that I just start working on. Is this urban village in Guangzhou. It's called Xianchuan. So for those of you who don't know what urban village is I can briefly explain. So in the socialist eras, what happened is that farmland belongs to the village itself. The relationship, the people's relationship with the state, impacted, mediated by these kind of connections. So these villages, once upon a time, they're outside the city. They were farmland. They are different villages. In fact, Shenchuan named San village, Shan is the name, the surname, right? This group of people as their village. And in the past, they were farmland. There was a few farmhouses there. As those mega city expands, in the case of Guangzhou, today the population is about close to 20 millions. Dongguan just outside of it, and Shenzhen also outside of it. Right? Dongguan and Shenzhen combined probably make all these crafts that we have at home, from your Samsung phone to your iPhone to your everything. Each of those have about 20 million people, plus Guangzhou, there's 60 million people right there. So just think about the expansion of the city. And the urban village, in the context of the last 30 years, what happened is that as the city expanded into the countryside, all this farmland was being converted, some were confiscated by the government or by developers. Now, but the original place the villagers actually live, what happened to them is that as they give up the farmland, they stop farming, they continue to live in those places, right? Because they have to live somewhere. So the last spot, the land that the government would grab, which is happening now. So what happened is these people also want to take advantage of the situation, and then since they're no longer relying on the income of farming, but what they do is they begin to build their little farmhouse and build high-rise. High-rise meaning 6, 7, the tallest I see was 9 stories, the longest is about 3 to 5 stories, and they begin to build them so that they can rent this place out to the migrant worker who come to the city and work. So they become landlords. But normally, so you have one building like this one. Take this one for instance, it probably belongs to one family. It was one plot of land that they have, right? And then they build up, they can spread it out for maybe 20 people there. So urban villages play a very significant role in Chinese economic development. Because the one thing about the migrant worker from the countryside is some of them, if they work for the Foxconn, for instance, they can work in those dormitories. Remember the dormitory that you can jump from the top and kill yourself? If you don't, you're not lucky enough to find one of those dormitories, then you can find a place here. Right? Say if you work, a migrant worker who work in the service industry in a small restaurant, they are not going to provide you dormitory, then you end up in this place like that. So this is the layers of exploitation that we're talking about. And a lot of the homeowners don't live in here anymore because they already buy an expensive villa or condo living in other parts of the city. But because the land relationship, the village collectively owns the lands, continues until today. Right? So what that means is that also the governing structure was very different. When they build this building, it's all kind of vernacular architecture. They hire somebody, or sometimes they themselves just do it, right, brick by brick, and then just build the building. They were not under the regulation of the Urban Planning Bureau of Guangzhou or anything. In fact, they can just do it any way they like. The village committee who governs. Right? So if they were okay with that, in most cases, okay. Now, of course, the urban village has there are a lot of geographers and scholars have worked on that. In fact, one thing I found interesting is that a lot of times they kind of talk about it a certain way. I just realized urban villages, in fact, shouldn't be diverse in China. They have different modes and different. So I'm by no means claiming this is this particular case is universal, but definitely something to think about. Based on what I read, this particular case in particular is quite different from other cases. Now, in all the major cities, there are several hundreds urban villages, meaning the city expanded so much. Some of them are smaller, some of them are less organized. In this case, particularly because it's in South China, the lineage relationship is very strong. The villages really organize themselves. As the government and developer come in and want to take those final pieces of land, they resist. Now, I don't want to present this as some heroic story against it, because remember, the actual owners, they are themselves landlords. A lot of them, they own a lot of them actually in very good income. Now, on top of that, they also want business. If they do business every year, for instance, some of the land might be building a shopping mall, etc. Right? So they have shares, they earn income, and then they will distribute those income to the villages, become a shareholder of this business. Now, the problem in these particular urban villages is because the village officials are very corrupt. The shares that was distributed to the villages today was exactly the same amount of money as they were 10 years ago. Remember, China got the beginning. Not to mention that a lot of this land, they sign off to give the government or the developers without the consent of the villagers, even though by law, because they are collectively owned, right? So finally, when the developer comes in and wants to take this final piece of land, these people resist. So we create a situation where about 70% of the population has signed the contract, but then you have another 30% or so refuse to leave. By refusing to leave, meaning they refuse to sign a contract. Now, some, not everyone is well off. Some of them, they do in fact family live there. In other cases, they don't live there anymore, but they will hire the migrant workers. They give them really low rent to make sure they live there, so that someone is occupying the space, right? And the developers, by now it should have been all done and finished, but obviously it's not happening. This has been ongoing for a number of years. Now, what happened then? A couple of years ago, one night the government sent in thousands of police and surrounded this village, basically isolated it. And then after that, midnight, gangsters come in. Now, I don't know how correct it is, but according to some online information that they post and some videotapes that the villagers took, every gangster was given 300 yuan, which is what, $50 about, to go in to beat those people up. Several villagers was killed in the process, many was injured, and it actually hardened the resistance against the developers. They refused to leave. In fact, they're suing the government and suing the village officials. Now, the village officials, as far as I know, have been indicted, although a lot of them have already left the country. But the government also refused to give those land back, even though they, technically speaking, acquired them illegally without the consent of the villagers. Right? So this becomes a stalemate. And so we create a situation where people actually still live people who live in the middle of the village itself. One thing, if you look at those buildings, you see the red flags on top of those buildings. Each one has a red flag, meaning there are at least one household who refuse to sign the contracts, meaning that they cannot come in and demolish it. What I thought was interesting, the whole symbolism, the revolutionary symbolism of being appropriated now to resist against the state. And with one few images. See the red flags? And see the new building under construction outside. I wish you to Joe's here. Fishing is a popular pastime in the village. I'm not joking. You go in, I spent 10 days there, I go back day and night. There's always people fishing. There's a red carpet there. See the red carpet? What happened was that as soon as some people move out, the developer will come in and try to take the door frame or the window frames away. They try to break part of the building. In some cases, the staircase will be broken or make it in such a way that it will be very difficult for you to walk up, despite the fact that you might still have one household living in the top floor. Just want to make sure that it becomes so difficult for you to live there that you will eventually give up and leave and sign a contract. What the people want is not, of course, nobody wants to live in a condition like this. They just want to have a much better compensation. I'm not going into the, I'm not trying to romanticize this, but the issue is about the very deep problem of this, the state of capitalism that is in China today. So I was sort of very briefly, I know it's about run out of time, but I want to briefly to talk about this. The red carpet image before that, what happened was that, actually I can show you in that image, but I thought, thinking about real estate. What happened was that this two building on this area was completely destroyed, meaning that they have moved out, they come in to completely demolish it and use the bricks to basically block the roads, so to make it difficult for people actually to go forward. And somebody put a red carpet to it, right? You can still walk up. And in these cases, I can't really show you this, but here you can see what happened is actually on this side, they put the debris, this is the actual alleys where the people are supposed to go through. They completely filled with debris, so you can't walk anymore. So the villagers come in and actually go into this abandoned building, which somebody lives in the top floor somewhere. They actually break the walls of different buildings so that you can create a new alley so that they can walk through. It's sort of thinking about the product of space, right, in the city. And there's a lot of these examples. This slogan here was written by the villagers themselves, basically say, give us back our right to elect our village official, or the right to election, meaning that technically speaking, at least according to the rules, that they should supposed to elect their own village official, but in this case, obviously, they were not. And one of the poor problems of this particular case. And then those are the official propaganda and the slogan. Right? So you have this slogan from the villages, and then you have this official and say, "I want to demolish this home. Please demolish it as soon as possible." Right? And then they accuse this small minority are blocking, the progress of the nation. And earlier, some people see the China dreams, whatever. And what is also interesting about this is that. If you walk around that, in all the entrance, there are chengguan, or the city control officers. It's the category of, people who are employed by the state, but they were not exactly police. They're between the police and the gangsters, so they can do the dirty work that the police don't have to do. And they will have chengguan 24 hours a day in all the entry point of the village. And so you can't easily go in and out and make sure that you actually not. You have to be in the village in order to get in. And then in each entrance, there are tape recording constantly, playing tapes, and normally just this conversation between different supposedly villagers and say, "Hey, how are you still here? I happened to move out five months ago. What's wrong with you? That sort of thing." It's going to go on, and then have comment from experts and say how great it is and how just and fair those conversations are. So it's sort of non-stop. And then when someone will read the rules, right? So you have all the tape recording outside. Here's again the same thing. You say this poster, but you can see they kind of faded. And it's about. I'm going to explain it, but basically gives a sense of urgency. Basically, like the one on the left, every day you don't move out, you lose so and so in the compensation. So by now, of course, the top left with nothing, so we don't want to leave anything. This is a place where they hold meeting against the development of the government, and it's interesting miles being mobilized. So very quickly, I want to this is from the Baidu. Baidu is the Chinese equivalent of Google. It's the map that shows the the two. So this is what we're talking about. This lake is the lake that you see earlier. So you see there's another much larger river which has not been demolished. So they were actually watching and see what happened to this one before. There's so many of them. But you can see, thinking about seeing from the state or from the perspective of the state, thinking about legibility, right? These urban villages, precisely the spot that's off-grid, is outside of the control. They are not legible. It's about breaking them and make them legible. Legible, of course, according to the logic of global capitalism. Another, again, show the two urban villages. The one that photographs on the left, the one on the right, people still live here, nothing happened to them yet. But again, you see what's legible and what's not, control and chaos. Now in photography, there's a sort of argument about figure and ground for those who are interested in design. Photography is about making a choice. So I give you an example, particularly in the context of colonial photography, for instance, in the 19th century. When the photographer take pictures, and you go to Africa, you take a picture, right? You make a choice. It's a white man, European white man, and then it's a black native. Now, especially in those days, the technology of photography, are you going to properly expose the black man, or are you going to properly expose the white person? Right? If you do it properly for the white man, the black man, then the white man will be completely overexposed. right? So you look at the images, 10 out of 10 cases, of course they properly exposed to the white man, and then all the black native, they were all underexposed, so dark, right? So this is, I'm bringing up this case besides sort of classic example of when we talk about figure and ground, that you make the choices, right? And then that's the moment that you really have to make a decision about what is being the priority and what is not, and which is the figure, which is the ground, which is the background, which is the foreground. Now, in urban design, urban planning, you have the same kind of thing. It is the figure is the building and the ground is the background, right? And this is sort of the idea behind. Depends on how you want to use it in what context. But in any case, inspired by that debate or at least the concept, I sort of pushed a little bit forward in my photography in the last part of my presentation. In the project that I'm still, as I said, ongoing, working, I need to go back to this place as soon as possible. Although it looks like a struggle, there's no end in sight anytime soon the struggle. But this is, you see the, it's before itself, you see the dark area. But think about the question about figure and ground. Which one is the foreground, which one is the background? So I'll move on to the end. See this group of people with it in the window, light. So this image is accomplished by using projectors to project date images that I took and project in the woods and then I take a picture of it. So it's how this happened. And it's one way for me to think about continuously about the question of figure, about question of priority, which one is the foreground, which one is the background, at least to complicate it. Thinking, right, instead of thinking about economic development, the global GDP is the highest priority. One perhaps, hopefully, is to think about this. And of course, photography, just like writing a book, cannot stop or cannot do much beyond creating a conversation. And part of what I hope to do is precisely to provoke that conversation. So that's all. And I know that.
Oh. Thank you so much, Professor Tong Lam, for this wonderful talk. That is definitely very provocative. As you said at the end of the talk, to use the trope of figure and ground, I definitely the ground here today. My name is Tong Lam. Teaching Chinese literature here at Berkeley, and actually Tong Lam and I are friends for years. We address each other in our emails by dear double, because we both where we go the family name Lam. But years ago, several years ago, at the AAS annual meeting, Tong Lam dragged me to a corner, seemingly making a confession to me, saying, actually, I'm kind of, and then I was expecting something very big coming out of the closet, and but he turns out to just confess to me that he is not only a historian, not only a scholar, but a photographic artist. So this is very surprising to me, and I didn't realize the other side of my double, who has that kind of deep sensitivity. And I thank heaven for this full circle to have him come to this campus and give this wonderful talk. And I think the final images are really striking to me because it really brings out one aspect of his photographic work that he had no time actually covering. That is kind of aesthetic, dreamy experience of his artistic work that can bring up to the audience. It's not just the historical information, it's not just social criticism, but remember those pictures with the deserted building as the so-called background, but somehow he used Tong Lam project some image on the broken wall, and to have that kind of seemingly double exposure to have two kinds of images. The ruins and the image of everyday life overlap together. I don't know whether you take note of that or not. I think that is really the high point of his art statement, that is the buildings, the concrete by itself actually is already a kind of fantastic projection of our desire, of our fantasy, right? And somehow we actually, at the end, we cannot distinguish which part is actually present, which part is absent, which part is our fantasy, which part is reality. I think that's really brings home the title of the exhibit. That is the unreal estate. Right? This is not just real. This is somehow surreal and unreal. And so I think I would start asking, not killing, our speaker with this question, that is, what do you think about the relationship between photography and visual evidence, if we are talking about some social issue, some historical problematic that is so grand that is about the problem of capital, and we use photos to talk about it. Are we just simply citing another kind of fact or another form of evidence, or we actually want to be more reflective about the whole discourse of what is fact, what counts as evidence, what is the yin dao, the heart that we should maintain, or you have even more deeper thought about it, because it really brings us back to your first book, that is a passion for facts, right? That is very critical genealogy about how come the modern Chinese would become so obsessed with gathering, collecting social facts about the population under the pressure of colonialism and modernization. So I will just give you the time to.
Oh, I try to make it very brief, thanks for the question. And I narrowly consciously thinking about these two projects, and really, even though this one started, I mean, the one sense of this project, it started before, sorry, not before, but during, the time when I was finishing the book, the other book. But to respond, so I don't know, maybe you can actually answer the question for me in a way that I simply haven't given a lot of thought about it. But as a very brief response, the ideas about facts, and even in the books, Passion for Fact, which we're talking about. But it's really, even in that book, when I'm very critical about the production of facts, at the same time, it's a historical work based on archival and empirical work, and so if you want to link connection, part of it is not, of course it's a construction. You are making your own intervention, making an argument. In this case, you are presenting, creating, actively creating images. I don't see myself documenting things at all. In fact, there's a long history, or at least it's about literature out there. You can think about, what is documented, and it's never just about really passively, receiving those lights and bring them into, the film, and then produce. But it's always actively going on to do certain thing. So the projection itself, or the way we frame it, is very much. I see that one can question the empirical evidence, because knowing those evidence will produce in a certain kind of context, right? Political, cultural context. At the same time, there is a way in which you can actually engage those evidence by bringing in evidence yourself. So in other words, it's not totally say anything go, right? So that in that case, you're projecting something. Both the projection itself are in fact, so to speak, documentary images, and then you project it into another real. Again, using this as a very powerful terms. But so there were sort of layers in the image, and you were superimposing one another, and to try to make the audience think. So I think that if you connect this, that's.
And that definitely, actually, you are the one person who can make this connection. And I think I think the whole topic of ruins really lets us think about the relationship between the onlooker and the visual image itself. As you said, it is not just primarily objective registration, but it is actually an ongoing two-way manufacturing or constructive process. And but also, I also want you to say more about the aesthetic effect of taking this kind of photos of woods. On the one hand, the main tone of your talk is very critical, but especially when you came to the part of the urban village. But at the same time, I want to give you more time to you that you can explain to the audience what kind of aesthetic experience we actually can gain from looking at this woman. That is at the same time terrifying, but at the same time I have to confess that I was sucked into that kind of beautiful spectacle. And somehow it is a problematic relationship between me and the tragic wreckage being deployed in front of me. But at the same time, actually, it is very provocative. And maybe you have more things to say about it.
This is a great question. Once again, I'm not entirely sure that I can answer easily. Susan Sontag, she actually talked about the suffering, right, and war photography, and I think that she have a discussion of that as well. And one of the things that I actually, your question reminded me of another talk that I gave in Beijing this summer in the Department of Visual Anthropology in University. There was a lot of students who are, most of them are undergraduate students, but it was very engaging conversation. So one of the central questions that they have, a lot of them have, in fact, this is the same question, and say, how do we deal with these images that on the one hand you seem to be critical, on the other hand those images themselves are so beautiful, they are very seductive, and that in the process are you reproducing the spectacle itself, right? And this is one question that I cannot answer, because I think we are all subjugated to the same aesthetic regimes that we somehow find those very seductive. That's why I'm there, and that's why you found it interesting and perhaps like it. But then at the same time, we are aware of this. Well, not everyone will be aware of it, but some of us are aware that the tension. This is, these are just like images of war and suffering. Then why are we so enjoying that? And I think that's a real challenging question. Now, the thing I want to say though is that in the project, even though I don't have a proper way to answer that question, but part of what I want to do, at least as I said, we cannot stop the war, we cannot stop the demolition, but we can produce a context for a conversation. And what I have been trying to do, not always successfully of course, is to, despite the fact they seem to be quite seductive and beautiful, at the same time I also want to make sure that there are things that will disturb and challenge the audience, as opposed to something that they will simply be able to consume it very easily. And then some of the things that might, in the book, for instance, that the images are even more beautiful than that, because the art was published by a commercial press that they require certain things. So I went, for instance, I want to put the images of people who are in the ruins. They said, no, you're not putting those. So there was sort of, some kind of interesting, tension there. But at least the text itself, if people do take the time to read the text, they do talk about things. So I hope those images, in the context of the book, when people look at it, at least they will start thinking, say, wait a minute, what's going on here? Then maybe the text, then they will start reading the text as opposed to just scrolling through the images, but I cannot control how to use it. But I certainly there's a attempt in the later images that I want to bring the issue up front without looking at the text itself.
Yeah, but I would like to add that with the text, your book is really powerful. Tong Lam is not only a visual artist, as he puts it himself, but he is actually quite a prose writer. And the prose is very informative and very historically informed, and also critically working. So I think my question actually is trying to tease out that quality that I hope the audience will further explore, because we have multiple copies outside, and then we will have a book signing. Okay.
Very quickly about that point is that I think I want to make sure, all within my ability, when I have taught courses on those issues, when I have read so many things about those issues at that high theoretical level, this is one place that I think I want to bring it down to make it accessible for the audience without losing the sensitivity. That's something I really insist on when I do that project. When I agree to do this commission with book, is really to make sure that this comes out so it doesn't become yet another simply spectacle. It is a spectacle, and they don't want to hide the fact that the books are beautifully made, etc. Because that's what they need to do. But at the same time, I want to make sure this message do come.
You could stop now, or you could continue a little bit.
Yes, I will open up.
Yeah.
To questions from the audience.
So I'm an architect, and we call this ruin porn.
I talk about it in the book too.
Yeah. And it actually seems to me to have a whole bunch of different variants of ruin porn. So the steel factory, for instance, is a place that was productive and was valued by the government at one point and has now become obsolete. Whereas Budos or the mall are places that were speculatively unwise. A lot of the ruin porn that's perhaps most popular here, for instance, tends to pursue either the sublime, the large tree growing out of the roof, or a lot of the Detroit-based ruin porn looks at something that was very lovingly made, expensive to build, probably inhabited by people who were elites, and has now been abandoned. And those are kind of social commentaries. But you seem to be having either difficulty or an unwillingness to make a statement about where it is that your particular work is trying to focus attention. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
You mean politically or simply the types of ruins that I'm interested in?
I think politically and intellectually.
Well, I think this brings us back to the earlier question, is that I actually talk about this very briefly in my book as well, about ruin porn. And so this whole genealogy is not just simply ruin porn. In fact, some people think it's a novel phenomenon, but even in the 18th century, there's something called the ruin lust. So there's actually a long history in which people are seducted to ruins. But the point, though, for me at least, is that back to my earlier comments about it, there is a constant tension that I'm fully aware of the critique. At the same time, I want to somehow keep the audience by producing, certain images that are attractive enough, but also, as I said, sort of try to bring out those issues, right, so that they can start thinking about the connections, the larger context. And one of the things, in fact, too complicated, but like Caesar talk about, that it's a lot easier for us to think about the end of the world. So we see the ruin point journals or photos really fit into all this kind of movie about apocalypses, etc. And we see so many of them everywhere. But at the same time, that we can't really think about the end of capitalism, right? So the so-called ruin point quality images in fact become part of the object of our consumption. That that's something that politically I try to battle. At the same time, as I said, that one have to do things that make it attractive enough, or sometimes in the case of working with a commercial publisher, that you have to make that kind of compromise and try to do it. At the same time, what I wanted to do is actually want to make people to bring in the larger questions behind this. So use this as a starting point. And one way I think about it metaphorically is like bringing the audience from one side of the building and lead them out from another door. And hopefully they will discover something else. So a lot of this is hidden, not hidden, but put in the text that I'm going to work through in the text itself. And actually have not extended, but at least a commentary about ruin porn and the critique, and then has a response to that question as well. And I think that question somehow also is very interesting and useful to think about those images, particularly images from dark people, that as if these things are not occupied anyone. But I think one of the things that I want to do is in fact to bring us up front that there are people who live there, and want people to think about why, what is there, right? That people who live in this building, and then the question is how what is rejected, and I think it's very important for me. I'll leave this at the moment. I hope
you mentioned that if you had a red banner on your house, it meant that somebody wasn't willing to sell at the price that they were offering. For whose benefit is the red banner on the building, and what's the practical effect of having one on my house?
No, we don't have choices. They put it up there. I mean, this is the banner is saying that they put in the developer and the government and saying to create this impression that the majority of people who live there want this building to be demolished, and so it's a propaganda. And this is
So the flags on top are people who are
Which
resisting,
is put by the villagers
were resisting.
to declare that we are not going to give in. We are not signing.
So you've got a problem with the words banner versus
Oh, okay.
flag.
I was just wondering who put it there and for whose benefit it was. The red, not the slogans, but just the red.
Flag.
Oh,
Flags.
but to show that we have so many of these. But
Okay.
it's also, this is a truth from the revolution that, raising this red flag, right? So decay will part of this movement, like revolutionary, but this is not revolution. And I think that was pretty fascinating that they actually mobilized the same technologies, the same techniques, right, for a different kind of purpose. But I think it's also some tactical vision to make sure that in fact someone lived there, because the crane will come in and destroy the building. I think it's for very simple safety reason, and you want to have this thing up there to make sure they don't hit the wrong building. Because they practically, you see these people live in the ruins, right? Part of the building is gone, but then you live on the other side. And you want to make sure you don't make a mistake.
Has Beijing, the capital city, been minimally damaged or damaged at all?
What do you mean by damage?
Well, pushed a building, damaging a building.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, the capital city, has the government damaged anything in the capital city?
Sure, the whole Bund,
The what?
all the 19th century structures that
Oh.
used to define Beijing are gone.
Yeah.
I see, yes, okay, good. That's what I thought.
The wall too.
Parts of the
The
wall.
city was gone.
Hmm.
Yeah, you sort of mentioned that that they were mobilizing like resistance technologies, and you said it was like very different. But is there any? I guess in the course of this project, have you seen what sort of like resistance politics have been articulated by people? I mean, is it in this case it's more in a way of like getting people to they want more money for it, but like have you seen things like squatters movements, that sort of thing, like anti-capitalist resistance movements against development or overdevelopment?
It's a good question. I think there are some outside people who come in and try to do that, but I don't think that the village is particularly interested in that. As I say, I don't want to simply show that this is the victims, because they themselves, a lot of them at least, benefit from it. And in fact, the people who live in Guangzhou, in the western Guangzhou, the villages are not very sympathetic, because say, locally, these people have owns a lot of things, right? If when they do in fact build those buildings, they're supposed to compensate you with exactly the same square footage. So if the whole building that you end up have 4 or 5 units, condos in the high-rise building in the same area, and this particular urban village is very interesting simply because it's right in the middle. The W Hotel is around the corner. The central axis, the 3 subway lines surrounding it. So this is like a gold mine, right? And they know the price is really high, and they don't want to give up easily. So so in that context, it is definitely far more interesting case. Yeah.
So just to follow up on that, so those people will already be small capitalists in effect. They're just trying to get a better deal or become developers themselves, perhaps?
They don't develop, they just want to have more, in part they don't trust the government, they don't trust because so many lands they own, also many of the farmland, they simply don't trust. So what they want to build in that building, they want to have the building built first, so they can actually move in the same location with the proper compensation, everything done, and then they move in and they can demolish the rest of them. Something that they want to develop, they want to develop some solution to do. But there was no active, to come back to the question, there's no active movement to try to, from their side. But there were NGO, there's some other people who come in and try to do things, I don't think it was very effective. Just pretty briefly that, I didn't say much about it, but the project is not a photographic, simply photographic project. Actually, it's spent many days there. They still need to go back and have done a lot of interviews and videos and sound recording. It's more like work at the end, but then so the work is progress.
collected so many other things, do you have any other plans for other projects or existing projects about this place?
About this place.
Yeah. Just photograph.
No, as I said, it's not a photo. Part of it is a photographic project, but I think it's some multimedia presentation.
So you will.
Yeah, I think the final part of it. That's why I said this is a work in progress. I want to show it to someone. As I said, I need to go back to do it. But so I have a lot of recording. It's really fascinating conversation with some people and the propaganda, the voice that I'm recording.
I was also curious how your photographic work, how do you do that on tenure track? Does this work relate to your history professor job?
It's not on tenure track because it's associate professor.
I understand that, but that means you traveled that track. And so I'm just asking about that experience.
That's a really interesting question. A lot of this done was near the end of that tenure track. So I think it was much that yeah, I wouldn't do it if I was still under pressure, and I don't recommend people do it. I don't think this will get you there. Even if it's a show at MoMA, I don't think it will work. Right? So you can forget it. I think maybe 10 years from now, we can see something. I don't think at this moment in time it's not something that people should do. Not at this stage. But now. Yeah.
An additional question? Oh, yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier you would talk a little bit more about your interest in art, how you came to develop interest in art and photography. Maybe you can elaborate about that. In your talk, you mentioned.
Yes, I know. So I can talk about it. Okay, I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So I'm always interested in art because I don't know what because, but in any case, it's this, the biography was that autobiography. When I was a kid, probably 7 or 8 years old, I was sent by my parents to private tutor for doing painting and drawings, all kinds, in every weekend. For like one afternoon in the weekend. Since then, all the way when I was a teenager, about 16, 17 or so. So this is like continue. I've done all kinds of painting, drawing, sketch, outdoor sketching, and oil, color, Chinese painting, also I think cycle back and forth. And then by the time I was about 16, 17, one day I talked to my he's an oil painter, he's one of the very best oil painters at the time in where I worked out. And I said to him that I'm not happy with anything that I have done, I don't like my work, and I think I'm horrible. And then he said, well, why don't you go to see more gallery shows and give you some inspiration, just go to see as many things as possible. So I went to follow this instruction, I went to see many shows, many different kind of art galleries. And then I came back to him a few months later and said, I saw them all, I don't like them either. I think my work is really terrible, theirs not that good either, but mine's even worse than that. And then basically he said that what that means is that your capacity to critique has gone beyond your capacity to create. When I heard that, when you're 16, 17 years old, and say, well, it's over, right? So I mean, there's so many other things going on, then why bother doing it? So that's one of the things that I stopped doing. And I throw away everything that I have created. Since I was a kid, I literally boxed things completely throw away. Not a single piece was left. So but that thing come back to me eventually. Was my interest.
I would just throw out there that Professor McLuhan from University of Toronto, he talked about artists as being social explorers, which I think you're doing that on a couple of levels here.
Is that a question or a comment?
No, it's just a comment. Being from the University of Toronto.
Right. Certainly exploring a lot of the spaces.
Yeah.
And all these places are very interesting. And I should add, a lot of the spaces depends on where you go. There are different kind of contexts you have to negotiate with. Right? Sometimes you're not supposed to be there. Sometimes it's much as possible when you get permission to be inside places. Increasingly, I realize I can actually abuse my role as a professor. You can actually get to a lot of places, just tell them exactly what you're doing.
pass at the beginning of this, you just walk, some of the places like Detroit and all these abandoned buildings, you just walk in. Right? And the police sometimes actually see that, and they said, make sure you don't have to call us later. Right? So meaning that you don't get trapped or something, so they don't really care. They can't care less. In fact, the response time, as we know, Detroit had declared bankruptcy, right, a few months ago. The response time for is about an hour.
Thank you very much for this very interesting, fantastic presentation. And I was just wondering, because you mentioned all these industrial ruins, which is mostly constituted of buildings, basically. But then you have this different case of urban village where still people are living there. So I was just wondering, being an artist and also a historian, do you think, while taking photographs at the same time, are you attracted by those people who live there? So, like being a historian or social observer, are you trying to relate to their life? And so, what's I was just trying to say that it's not just a aesthetic project, but also it's a kind of social political issues that are around. So that.
Yes, it is a certain level. I mean, I think this is the issue of empathy, that you will see that and nobody wants to live in a condition like that, right? And you really touch you, or as I said, the little kids I will never forget is that when they respond to their question, they feel so sad. And these people imagine that they can live in with a relationship with the world unit, even though they have no more relationship. In fact, I mentioned that I didn't have time to talk about this before. I spoke with an artist who, a local, this was happening in Chongqing, in Sichuan province, and in fact, this local space was actually a local artist who told me that base. He had done a project which is not photographic, but what he do is a project in which he interviewed these people and asked them what is their desire if they have the money to travel. Now, at the moment, they don't want to leave the community because the outside world has changed so quickly, so much. They actually feel scared when they go out. It just doesn't make sense to them anymore. Right? They still live in the 1970s universe. That's why they continue to imagine the relationship with the state, with the world unit that no longer exists. Now, so he asked him, like, what are your desire if you want to travel to places? And then they will come up with that. He interviewed and then he found out what they want is actually go to Tiananmen Square, but the Tiananmen Square they're thinking is not the one with McDonald's and Starbucks next to it, right? It's the old, going to Jinghuangshan, and all this like revolutionary sites. So they really lived in that universe in the 1960s and 70s, right? So it's really stunning that when you actually talk to them and say, and this is the place that, well, what would you do when you have such a song, when you approach this and think about it? And really, for me, it haunts me to not simply. It was one of the moments that I felt, and of course, this is another question, potential, but to bring back to another question about art and intellectual concern, is that it haunts you and say, what exactly are you doing? Are you going to simply light an archive? You're just getting the evidence, or in fact that you go into this place and take pictures. But even that ethically is also an issue, like, because is it extracting? Are you simply extracting things, right? Are you giving anything back to them? I mean, that's one of the questions I kept actively, also thinking about. Are you just simply doing, like an archive, you can do it a lot easier without that kind of moral question being raised in the same way as here, that you're doing this. Right? So, but what does it mean? What can you bring back to the community? What can you do to them? And it's something that I still need to explore. And I need to think about this kind of question, but it's definitely, and I think this urban village project is for the very first time, I have to confess, this really presented real tension for my own other part of my professional life, that I was invited to do an exhibition, that was happened there because the curator's assistant showed me around in the way to the gallery that I saw this. I didn't even know it existed, and even though I know the phenomenon of the village, but not this particular way, not in this one stunning way. So after that, I just asked. She said, anything else I can show you around? I said, I want to be back. We
just talk about. I saw in the car. I saw from the window. I saw, can I go back to that place? And then she happened to live around there. We said, yeah, I can take you there. And then she walked me into this places, getting as sometimes different, sometimes it's not. At that moment, it was quite okay. And then, I was just staying in the city for a day, and then I left the next day as planned, right? And then, but that experience, the images keep haunting me. I just cannot stop thinking about it. And I was supposed to be in archive in the next month. And that was for the very first time I feel that tension. And eventually I just bought my ticket and went back there for 10 days. I checked in the hotel next door, not in the building. Although you can live there, but if you actually know, I know somebody might have been there, but if you know actually how terrible it is, it's pretty stunning.
I have a following question. Your project is about the ruins, industrial ruins. It just reminded me that there are some of the process of capitalism and also globalization going on actually left no trace at all, like the taking over of the farmland and then also like the forced relocation, the state relocation of the villages, real villages in the rural area. Actually, their land was just taken over by the government, and leaving no trace at all. So those part of, I think that's just a part of to relate it to this urban village, because the urban village became visible because they still have these buildings living there, but a lot of people were just their home was just demolished and just taken over. So in this case, that the resistance was kind of against the government, but these people who live there, they're also, like you said, they're beneficiary of the whole capitalism, so the process, and they become the shareholders. But they're real victims to this development. So I was just wondering, those people are become like invisible.
Right, and this project surely in no way make them visible because it doesn't engage the question at all. And yes, so there's a lot of things about China or the world that we dealt with, and then at the moment, But I'm also doing it. Just want to bring real quickly that we're doing with two other colleagues, and I'm doing a collaborative project that doing a documentary film. It's not about ruins at all. It's totally something different, but it does bring up some of the issues that we mentioned. We look at some of the Tibetan regions in Sichuan, forced relocation, and also forced the people to actually to step away because they have been longer. So there's a lot of issue there. How is that?
I was wondering if you could talk about how these types of images are represented and perceived within China itself. I feel like it's pretty, it's pretty popular in the States, and I feel like it resonates really strongly with the kind of images that you showed in Detroit and that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how they're represented within China.
How they were presented in China, in general. So there's a lot of Chinese artists since the 1990s have done works on that. By no means this is novel in any way. That ruins and Mongol is written about among other people. There's a lot of people written about, and there's different kinds of arts that came out much earlier. Now, how they received it depends on, you mean the ordinary people or the states. A lot of time depends on. I think the issues about China is that everything is rather unpredictable and contingent. There are things that you think will be censored, but there are things that nothing will happen. There's something that you don't expect anything, but things actually would happen to it. So, Wu Hong, this is a curator who a pretty famous curator who teaches in Chicago, but also extensive connection to Beijing and China elsewhere. He actually written a book in the 1990s called
exhibit canceled. They actually do a show right, about the cancel the exhibition, which will bring out the politics, some of the issues about this example and see actually what happened about things being canceled, but actually things still going on. So it's also one of the phenomena in China that you can officially you cancel the exhibition, censored, but unofficially things can still go on. And then last November, I had a personal experience of that. I was invited by curator Oling, who been in his Yishan International Photo Festival is in Anhui, Guangzhou, and now in Shanghai. They invited me to be there as one of the 14 artists, and 10 international artists were presented by the exhibition. And so I was debating whether I should go or not in the middle of the semester. So I eventually did, and flew all the way to Shanghai, and then the next day I flew to Guangzhou. And then they have the assistant was waiting for me at the airport. The moment I stepped out from the terminal, she was there and said that, have you heard that the exhibition has been canceled? I said, what? Like it came all the way and then they said we canceled it a few hours ago. Then we went and then so we, this is kind of good joke but true, but and then said, by the way, there's a police car waiting for you outside. And so, but then he explained right away, of course, he said, what it means is that, because it's a small county, we need to mobilize all the vehicles to transport our VIPs, and you happen to have a police car. And so we drove an hour into the Yishan area, and then of course the other artists, most of the artists, especially those from international artists, because they have to travel pretty far away, they're over there. Some local, they got the news last minute, they didn't go. But in any case, one of the argument about the cancellation is that, so this is the exhibition was done in different ancestral hall that he did, as very briefly, I don't want to take less time. So one of the ancestral hall was devoted to images of waste, decays, and environmental issues, negative aspect of modernization. And my set of photo belongs to that, along with several artists, Chinese artists and also American artists who works in that ancestral hall was one of the two most controversial part of that. The official came in the last minute and said, what do these images have anything to do with this place or China? And of course, the larger issue was that was the 18 Parties Congress around the time, and the local official was worried about any kind of sensitive events. And that day, the New York Times reviewed the exhibition itself. Ironically, it was out in there. So only it was reviewed, and then they canceled it. And then, of course, they didn't know that, of course, right? And then after it was canceled, the New York Times come back and say it become the event itself. And so often have this kind of the irony. And so nobody expected, but then, if we go back and think about it, then yeah, why not cancel again? Given the fact that they cancel some all sort of thing. But I say a lot of things happen and cannot happen. It's very hard to think. But in this case, they reacted very negatively. But I don't think it has to be normal. Most times they don't even care.
Please join us in the little reception outside, and there would be a book signing event also.
If anyone is interested.
Okay, thank you very much.